If a gentleman came passing by, would you fill him a drink if he was dry at the well below the valley-o? Green grows the lily-o, right among the bushes, oh. Me cup is full up to the brim, and if I were to stoop, I might fall in at the well below the valley-o. Green grows the lily-o, right among the bushes, oh. If your true love was passing by, would you fill him a drink if he was dry at the well below the valley-o? Green grows the lily-o, right among the bushes, oh. She swore big grass, she swore big corn, her true love had never been born at the well below the valley-o. Green grows the lily-o, right among the bushes, oh. And he said, young maid, you swear and wrong, 6 fine children you have born at the well below the valley-o. Green grows the lily-o, right among the bushes, oh. And if you be a man of noble fame, you tell to me the father of them at the well below the valley-o. Green grow the lily-o, right among the bushes, oh. There's 2 of them by your brother John at the well below the valley-o. There's 2 of them by your uncle Don at the well below the valley-o.
Ireland is a country steeped in history, and that history has been preserved from generation to generation by monuments and murals, by arches and parades. An Irish anthropologist once wrote that Irish parades are the performance of memory. That memory crossed the Atlantic in the 1700s and gave rise to the Philadelphia St. Patrick's Day Parade.
Well, for the Irish American community, St. Patrick's Day celebrated both the person and the mythology and the ethos of who St. Patrick was. They celebrated this man who had been taken to Ireland as a slave, taken from his Romano-Briton homeland, brought into Ireland, where he was forced to work as a shepherd. And of course, the story is that he escaped and went to continental Europe, where he was ordained and felt the call of God to go back and serve the very people who had enslaved him.
Well, St. Patrick was a towering figure in early Irish history. He's the one individual who stands out at the ending time of the Roman Empire and the beginning of the Middle Ages, marking the transition from paganism to Christianity, not only in Ireland, but throughout Europe as a whole. The Irish monks who are going to become his followers would take Catholicism to the areas of the European continent where paganism still prevailed. Founding of monasteries, the spreading of learning and literacy, the creation of libraries. This is all St. Patrick's legacy. An individual who, at the right time in history, became the giant, the one individual whom the entire country can point to and say, this is kind of like their George Washington, of the early Middle Ages. And interestingly enough, there's, the founding figure for Irish culture, but also the founding figure for the concept of, the Irish as a population that had a political reality. The High Kings of Tara, and he fought against the pagan priesthood there, and then, all the kings converted to Catholicism, and Christianity becomes this major factor in northwestern Europe, largely because of him.
St. Patrick allegedly was Welsh and came to Ireland to clear the country of snakes, as well as bring Christianity to the people But what St. Patrick's represents is a cultural icon that all Irish across the globe can identify with. And for that one day of the year, we can all unify together around celebrating St. Patrick and celebrating the fact that we're Irish.
It's important to honor St. Patrick because communities need figureheads in leadership. And though leadership may change year to year, someone that we can look to as a North Star of who we want to be and who we want to be as a community, what aspects we want to share, what morals we have, and what we stand for. It's important to look to someone like St. Patrick because he will always be that guiding light for the Irish community.
And certainly the ethos and the mythology of it was, you know, the kindness of going back to those who had enslaved him, bringing the message of Christianity and the message of renewal in Ireland, putting their past behind them and moving forward into a new future. And that's really what the St. Patrick's Day Parade is still all about. You know, it's celebrating how you don't have to be ethnically Irish to celebrate St. Patrick and to enjoy the day and to certainly to celebrate his life. Here in America, you know, those of us who are born in the United States who have Irish and Irish background, we know that most of us are mongrels, we're cultural mixes.
The origins of the Philadelphia St. Patrick's Day Parade go all the way back to 1771. The time when the Philadelphia St. Patrick's Day Parade originated was the time when the Irish didn't have many rights, of course, in their own country, when they weren't really welcome in a lot of cities within the North American colonies of the British Empire. At that time, that Philadelphia was the second largest English-speaking city in the world. It was larger than most of the cities in the UK at the time. It was a kind of important factor also that there was a degree of freedom to the Irish Catholic community in Philadelphia that did not exist in Ireland at the time when the British dominated. Old St. Joseph's really was the only freely operating Catholic church in the British Empire at the time. Really the only Catholic church available in anywhere in the English-speaking world. There's a time of great persecution, a time of great repression of the Irish, and then here's this big celebration of being Irish, you know, held in the city of Philadelphia.
We're talking about a time period when the Irish are really just kind of starting to get organized in the city of Philadelphia. The Friendly Sons of St. Patrick had been organized.
The members of the Friendly Sons of St. Patrick were the principal individuals within the Irish community in Philadelphia at the time.
Well, the Friendly Sons were organized in 1771, and in the colonies there was an air for the revolution that was already stirring at the time. The Boston Massacre had happened in 1770. Later in 1771, you actually had a rebellion stirring in North Carolina. And in the Philadelphia area, there were a number of Irish who decided to band together to organize what became known as the Friendly Sons of St. Patrick.
I think it's very important that each generation extend and continue our cultural links between the United States and Ireland. The fact of the matter is that we were the first two countries to ever fight the same foe for our independence successfully. And I think a lot of the claims that were made in the Declaration of Independence are claims that were repeated in the Irish Proclamation, the rights of all people to be free, to live with dignity, and have certain unalienable rights. And you know, if each generation doesn't renew that cultural link, something essential would be lost, and I think that that would be lost on both sides of the Atlantic.
The Redcoats are marching. But what say you to this marching men of New England? Where will you take your stand? On the bridge at Concord or on the village green at Lexington?
It was unique for its time in that it was sponsored by both the Protestant and Catholic churches, but members were from all different traditions in that sense from Ireland. And so it was unique in its day. And it brought together folks from politics and the military. In Philadelphia, there is what's called the Patriot Plaque at City Hall, and that honors Irishmen and folks of Irish descent who risked their lives fighting for independence. And that became part of just the cultural identity of the Philadelphia Irish, that you had 14 signers of the Declaration of Independence who were of Irish descent or were born in Ireland themselves. You had 14 military men who fought in the Navy and in the Army, and these men were folks that Philadelphians were proud of, not just the Irish, but Philadelphians and Americans in general were proud of these men. They risked their lives for freedom.
So Philadelphia had a special status, and it drew individuals from the country who were people who had an opportunity to participate in America in a way that they could not participate politically and publicly in their mother country. So people like Commodore John Barry, who was a naval hero even before the Revolution, someone who was a record setter in terms of speed across the Atlantic, becomes father of the American Navy. He started out his life in Cork as someone who wanted to get into mercantile endeavors, and he really got that opportunity when he came to Philadelphia. He crossed the Atlantic many times. The American Revolution broke out. Like many of his fellow Irishmen, he joined the Patriot cause and fought against Britain for the age-old animosities, of course, that had embroiled this country for 1,000 years by that time. John Barry becomes known during the American Revolution as one of the most capable seamen of the day, one of the most competent of the officers in the Continental Navy. And then later on, after the Revolution is done, he ascends to the actual rank of Commodore and is the first individual to hold that title. Very important relationship with George Washington. He'd be instrumental in allowing Washington to join the Friendly Sons of St. Patrick, actually as the first honorary member, something that wouldn't be achieved again until the 21st century when Ambassador Ann Anderson also attained that honor.
St. Patrick's Day, it's the single day in the year where all over the world, all over America of course, but also all over the world, back in Ireland, you come together on a single day of celebrating that precious Irish identity. So you feel a sense of connection to the homeland, a sense of connection to the Irish community, the 70 million diaspora around the world, and then all the strands of your own community come together.
Stephen Moylan, who becomes Washington's aide-de-camp and the Quartermaster General of the Continental Army. These are important individuals, and they will, prior to the American Revolution, be responsible for setting up what will become the most important parade in Philadelphia's history. In recognition of the valor of the Irish soldiers serving in the Continental Army against the British in the American Revolutionary War, General George Washington issued a general order on March 16th, 1780, that read as follows. The General congratulates the Army on the very interesting proceedings of the Parliament of Ireland and the inhabitants of that country, which have been lately communicated. Not only as they appear calculated to remove those heavy and tyrannical oppressions on their trade, but to restore to a brave and generous people their ancient rights and freedom, and by their operations to promote the cause of America. Desirous of impressing upon the minds of the Army transactions so important in their nature, the General directs that all fatigue and working parties cease for tomorrow, the 17th, a day held in particular regard by the people of the nation. At the same time he orders this, he persuades himself that the celebration of the day will not be attended with the least rioting or disorder, the officers to be at their quarters in camp, and the troops of the state line to keep within their own encampment.
Well, in Philadelphia, the St. Patrick's Day Parade is a very important event. It allows the regional Irish diaspora to come together in one location, which is a historically significant city to be in. The parade is on the Parkway. It goes by the cathedral.
The St. Patrick's Day Parade, as it emerged over the years, is the biggest parade in the city, the entire history of the city, and it is the spoke, really, in the wheel of the Irish community throughout the year. It's the event that everyone looks forward to in the Delaware Valley. It's the most expensive, showy, loud, and most magnificent of all the city's parades.
When the revolution came and the parade kind of takes on an emphasis where these Irishmen had to kind of prove themselves as Americans, the parade continued to kind of to grow and develop and to bring in certainly a larger community as more and more Irish came to this early United States.
And what it meant to those early generations of immigrants was that this was a place where they could make it. Individuals of a very humble origin, making it within this larger environment. And the parade is this grand demonstration of, hey, we're here, we're comfortable with this new world. They were among the first in America. It was one of the earliest parades in the United States. Prior to 1771, it's just like New York would have had a parade, and Boston eventually, and down in the 1800s, eventually Chicago. And Philadelphia, I think, has remained in the top 3 or 4 parades in terms of the volume of participants, and this is the sheer magnitude of the events of the cities in the United States. So it's a big event. It's a rite of passage every year for the Irish community in the Delaware Valley, and participants have now gone from as far afield as the South Jersey area, central Pennsylvania, northeast Pennsylvania, and northern Delaware. The parade has always reflected the larger environment, so that when there are big historical moments, big tragedies, okay, that's going to get commemorated in the parade by the participants.
We know that by the end of the 18th century, there's another kind of an emphasis on Irish immigration, because what happens is in Ireland in 1798, you had the Wolfe Tone Rebellion.
Gradual influx during the early days of the 1800s, for several decades actually of the 1800s, with more and more Catholic Irish immigrants coming in, that you had more of an assertion through the years of the famine.
As we get into the 1840s and into the early 1850s, there's a large influx, and part of the issue was there also the corn laws in Ireland were making it so hard for the Irish to exist, and when the famine hits, they come to this new world, and they bring with them a different emphasis as they also march in the parade here in Philadelphia. There were celebrations in the 1840s when the Corn Law was repealed, and Irish folks in Ireland could actually move beyond the famine eventually, and the economy could start to rebuild slightly, but it took years for that to happen.
The history of the Irish Catholicism in Philadelphia was a difficult one in the 1840s with the destruction of 2 Irish Catholic churches, St. Michael's and St. Augustine's, because the know-nothings were, thought that the bloody hand of the Pope was going to ruin America. And that's why the cathedral was constructed without windows on the first floor, because we learned that you could firebomb something from a lower level than you can from an upper level.
And as we look, as the century moves on towards the Civil War, we know that certainly Irish units formed in the Philadelphia area. They marched, in all the large events and all the parades in Philadelphia at the time period.
Alexander Ripon was a member of the 1st Maryland Potomac Home Brigade, mostly served in Harper's Ferry guarding the trains and so forth, but he was here on Culp's Hill. One of the generals spoke around 1863 that said they had recruited for the army to fight the battle on the field, but they had all these women fighting the battle on the home front. When their husbands went off to war, they were left with the responsibilities of maintaining their home, if they still had a home to maintain. They were the 2nd Army that would supply things for the men.
In the beginning of parading, it was mostly military or political people, and that meant men. So that's who was marching in the parades. However, they started to notice how wonderful women were and what good workers they were.
And again, they bring their own culture too. We know that they were hired very often as they came off the boats, just like they did in the 1830s and 1820s.
The Industrial Revolution in America would provide Irishmen and Irish women with opportunities they couldn't have back home. Despite the political emancipation of Irish voters in 1829, economic parity wouldn't be possible for decades to come. The Industrial Revolution in America provided the opportunity for Irish people to actually earn a wage for the first time in their lives. I mean, most of these individuals had basically been living in a medieval kind of serf economy, dominated by British absentee landlords. And economic opportunities in the Industrial Revolution included railroad construction, canal construction, factory work, textile mills, various other industries in Philadelphia along the river wards were an enormous beacon drawing the Irish to this area. The parade that would emerge in Philadelphia served in many instances as a means to emphasize pride in the homeland and what good can be derived from a collective memory, a means of forgetting daily hardships that they might endure over here working in the Industrial Revolution in America.
And so the parade expands out, it grows as time goes on and as the Irish immigrant community grows. The city of Philadelphia grew, and it incorporated large ethnic Irish communities into the borders of the city of Philadelphia. And those folks brought their own specific themes and emphases. Like, for example, churches would have community, the community march in the parade. There would be an opportunity to express Irish nationalism, but also, to do it as Americans, to kind of show their loyalty to America, and also to show their loyalty to the Philadelphia community.
It's natural that the parade would reflect political issues from the mother country in Ireland. And certainly a lot of individuals in the Irish American community in the Delaware Valley would be very attuned to the struggles in Ireland. Obviously during the years after the famine, struggle for independence, whether going back to the Fenian Brotherhood, the years of the Irish Revolution, through the Irish War of Independence. Through the 20th century later on, as Northern Ireland became a focal point for conflict, age-old conflict going back 400 years.
During the 1950s, the Sunday press came on stream, and every weekend they would have some action that took place during the War of Independence. And as a young lad, 14, 15-year-old, I was sorry that I wasn't around in those days to take part in these actions.
During the Depression and the pre-war years, there were other things on the minds of Americans, and parades in general, and in particular the St. Patrick's Day parade, didn't have as large of a communal support. There might have been an intellectual support, but you didn't have the funds, you certainly didn't have the people who could take off time and prepare properly for a parade like the Philadelphia St. Patrick's Day parade.
In the 1930s and the 1940s, the St. Patrick's Day parade basically was on hiatus due to the Great Depression and the Second World War. After the war ended, the Ancient Order of Hibernians assumed control over the parade, formed the Observation Committee, which today still runs the parade. The City of Philadelphia and the Archdiocese of Philadelphia came together, and one single unified St. Patrick's Day event occurred here on the Parkway in Center City, instead of the smaller neighborhood events that would have happened prior to that time.
And again, as the pre-war years and as we entered the war, there were other things on the minds of America. There wasn't the funding that you would have needed to put on a parade as elaborate as we would in the year 2017. And so it impacted certainly on the types of floats, on the types of all the supplemental things that you needed for a parade that we would take for granted today. But during World War II, we could think of how that certainly impacted the Irish American community. There were folks from Philadelphia, who were drafted, who were sent all over the world. Again, the Irish Americans who marched in the parade during the war years are very proud to do that and to be proud Irish Americans. But it certainly kind of dampened both the enthusiasm and the ability of the Irish community to celebrate.
The official ideology of the southern state was nationalist, Catholic, and Republican. The Constitution laid explicit claim to the North. In this context, partition was widely regarded as an enduring evil of British colonialism.
The importance of the parade to continue is that it has to be a way that we continue promoting our Irish culture. I know with the technology and the internet, we're very much in touch with different cultures, but it's the one event that pulls us all together from not just being an individual society, because the St. Patrick's Day Parade, if you look at it, it represents the Irish diaspora, and even going back before that to the people that came here from the Famine area, from even before that. So the importance of the parade is that it is probably the one event that will tell us how the future of Irish culture will survive in America.
So the era of the Troubles from the 60s to the 90s, there will be a lot of groups, a lot of floats, a lot of marching groups that are going to reflect support for the Irish cause and the cause of Irish independence in Northern Ireland as well. It's a kind of constant, and it's something to be very understandable, you know, given the circumstances back in the home country.
My earliest thoughts on the St. Patrick's Day Parade go back to 1966. I remember my father being excited about the 50th anniversary of the Easter Rising.
The uprising of 1916 was an assertion in arms of the right of the Irish people to be free. Freedom has been secured now over more than 5/6 of the national territory. We confidently hope this will not be long until the whole country is united.
When I look back and I think about the parades, there's a lot of connected Irish history events, especially recent Irish history, where you have 1969, you have the Civil Rights Association. I remember that was part of the parade.
When the atrocity of Bloody Sunday happened, you had all these young, unarmed kids killed by an occupying British army. And the truth took years to come out, even though we in the Irish community knew the truth behind it. So the parade gave us the opportunity to march, to carry their names, carry their photos of all these young people who had been killed for asking for civil rights at the time when around the world civil rights was becoming something that people were paying attention to. The importance of the parade was that we could tell our story of the denial of civil rights. And we marched right past Independence Hall, which to me was always so significant, that here we're bringing the story of Irish people being denied civil rights, being denied so many things. There were problems with housing issues, voting issues, that if you went to protest, you would be shot dead in the street. So it was so significant to have that opportunity to march by Independence Hall, carrying pictures of Bloody Sunday victims.
If you go down through the years, there's also the issues of Castlereagh tortured statements. Back in the 70s, you have the hunger strikes.
Well, I arrived in Philadelphia in 1974, and before that, I had known that this Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association had marched in the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Philadelphia. But in 1972, Irish Northern Aid was formed, and they began to march every St. Patrick's Day. Now, it wasn't simple at the time because we were more of a political organisation, and some in the St. Patrick's Day Observance Committee wanted to keep politics out of it. But the thing about it was, if you were going to celebrate Ireland on St. Patrick's Day out in the United States, we felt that the people here in the States should also know what is happening to the Irish people, especially in the north of Ireland. And if you recall, at that time in the early 70s, we had internment where people were imprisoned without trial. We had people going to prison under diplomat courts, which meant there was no juries. So we had to highlight the plight of the people in Ireland. So one of the biggest opportunities we had to bring our message out was the St. Patrick's Day Parade March. And we have marched in it every year since. Sometimes, as I say, not in the greater favour of the Observance Committee, but over time we acclimatised to what they wanted, and they permitted us to march to a certain extent. Having said that, for many, many years we never made the television, which we wanted to do for publicity, for the simple reason is that mostly we were put at the end of the parade. However, that mostly changed coming up into the early 80s, where the prisoners inside the prisons went on hunger strike and dirty protest.
During the hunger strike I would say, was probably the most tense time in the prison. I mean, I, for one, didn't think that a prisoner would die on hunger strike. I thought when they were on hunger strike, they'd come to an agreement with the government, but I could not for life of me see the government letting somebody die. And it came as a shock when the first one died. And then that threw a blanket over the Maze prison, the atmosphere, and you could have cut it with a knife.
And especially in 1981, when the hunger strike was started, Bobby Sands, he began his hunger strike on May 1st. And right after that was the St. Patrick's Day Parade. And we had the biggest crowds in the parade of any organisation that year. Bobby Sands, he got elected as an MP for Mid-Ulster and West Tyrone. And that really awakened people, both over here and in Ireland, how strong the support was for the hunger strikers. He was the first MP ever was elected who was imprisoned. And Bobby Sands, what they had done, they had got the political agenda on the road. It was them who showed the way that politics could work. And from that, we got a ceasefire, we got a peace process, we got the Good Friday Agreement, which all came from the hunger strike. Without them, it wouldn't have happened. Take a look now. We are in joint government. The Sinn Féin is in government both in the north of Ireland, the second biggest party. And it is reflected out here through the peace process and everybody getting behind it. Peace process itself, while it was tough negotiation, it lifted the aspirations of everybody north and south of Ireland. We had, in the south of Ireland, we had the Celtic Tiger, where the country was booming for years.
After the Good Friday Agreement, there was an economic boom in Ireland that was brought about by the hopes of reunification, the North and the South. And it's called the Celtic Tiger. There's an enormous economic opportunity that arises for many Irish Americans as a result of this, with their connections in the old country. And it's reflected in the parade. The various organizations and the companies from Ireland that invested in America and American companies that invested in Ireland. And so there's an enormous upsurge in terms of the number of activities, groups that are represented in the parade.
In the north of Ireland, we had people living, they weren't afraid to go out shopping, they weren't afraid to go to the store, they weren't afraid to go to the movies because the war had stopped. So everybody was elevated into a higher place than where they were before. And everybody was happy and were relieved that for once and for all, the troubles have been over.
Of course, the Celtic Tiger eventually dissipates, and the economy back in Ireland somewhat diminished. But the connections that were established between Ireland and America economically, the Irish companies that employ Americans and American companies that employ Irishmen, it's something that has continued to the present. so that it's not something that's completely disappeared, even though the economic downturn, is obviously noted by economists.
We've been involved with the parade since roughly 2006. It was an obvious match for us as an organization representing companies that do business between Ireland and the United States, as well as the general Irish-American business community in Philadelphia. We think it's critical to be part of the parade given our mission. We represent the interests of businesses in the community, as well as educational institutions. For us, the parade is not only an expression of pride and a way of honoring our history, but also it's forward-looking in hoping to continue the relationship between Ireland and the United States, particularly the greater Philadelphia area, in the years to come.
As a member of Congress now, and as a first-generation Irish-American, of course, I'm the continuation of a long tradition of Irish-Americans who went into public service. And I think there's something about the Irish culture of giving back, believing in building a community, believing that we are one part of a larger family. I think that that's all part of why you've seen so many of Irish backgrounds go into politics. And I think one reason why so many Irish have been successful is that because we tend to like and care about people. We like telling stories. We like being involved in things. There's no secret that there are a few million Irish societies. These are all positive traits that lend themselves very positively and lend themselves well to politics.
There's always been a political connection to the parade, especially from my family being from the occupied 6 counties. It was always a way for us to put forward what was going on over in Ireland at the time and use it as a platform to put that out in public. We didn't really get as much publicity as we liked at the time, and it was our way of telling people what was actually happening back at home as far as the political situation.
We know that from the very beginning it was also a family thing. The parade was very much celebrating the Irish family in the New World. Various clubs support the parade in the Philadelphia community, and these are very often associated with families.
The fact that there are going to be floats and parade marching groups, reflecting that theme is just a matter of course. They're going to try to engender as much local support for these struggles in the mother country as possible.
The chair recognizes Councilman Heenan, who will present a resolution honoring Barney Boyce as Grand Marshal of the 247th Annual St. Patrick's Day Parade. With Mr. Boyce and those accompanying him, please join the councilman at the podium.
I think it's very important to get family involved, and it's a great way to celebrate together, celebrate their Irish heritage.
People like to bring their children out to the parade to watch it and to be involved in the marching of the parade. Children love that, and my children especially, down through the years, we brought them all to the parade at different times when they were able to walk, and even pushed some of them in strollers just to get them out and get them used to the parade and get them involved in the Irish.
It's good to keep the family involved in Irish stuff, because lots of times you hear people and they'll say to you, oh, my grandfather came from Ireland, but I don't know where. And that's people that never really brought their kids up with Irish, knowing where they were from and all that stuff. But we did not let that happen to our family. We brought them to Ireland, and many, many times, and now they go on their own to Ireland, and they're very, very involved in all the Irish activities and music and dance and everything else. So I think it's important to bring your family up with the Irish heritage.
As a child, we grew up with St. Patrick's Day Parade. My father and mother were very active in the Irish community. We would go to New York on occasion for their St. Patrick's Day parade also. Irish music was very much a part of our family life, and constant contact by way of mail with our relatives in Ireland.
This St. Patrick's Day parade has been a very important thing for my family. My parents were officers in the Mayo Association and also Kelly dancers, set dancers, and they would dance with the Mayo Association every year in the parade. So that was always fun for us to come down and see our parents involved. And then as we grew, I'm one of 8 children, to come down with my siblings, to come down then with my children, and now I have grandchildren to bring to the parade. So it really is a family, a generational thing now. We're on our 4th generation of parade goers.
Very important that we pass that on to our children and our children's children, to keep that the most important thing about St. Patrick's Day and the parade.
Dead generations from which she receives her old tradition of nationhood. Ireland, through us, summons her children to her flag. And
it's kind of a birth thing. Patrick Francis Michael Dugan. There's no option. I was born into it, and I love it. And as a sitting judge, I always want to make sure that I'm part of it. Even before I was a judge, I was always down here for every parade, marching with 3 or 4 different organizations and passing it on to my grandbabies.
My family's history with the Philadelphia St. Patrick's Day Parade really started with my father, Philip Newt Bonner. He started the Southwest St. Patrick's Club in Southwest Philadelphia and eventually joined the St. Patrick's Day Observance Board Association back in the 50s. He wasn't one of the charter members, but one of the first members after the first few years of it organizing. Since my father's passing a few years ago, my family wanted one of us to stay on the board, and I now am a board member on the St. Patrick's Day Observance Board, and I love being a part of it. We live here in Havertown, which they call the 33rd County, but I grew up in Southwest Philadelphia, went to West Catholic High School, same as my dad did, and my mother. I'm one of 8. My dad was Grand Marshal, about 2001, I believe was the year. My mom's been on the Roll of Honor a couple times for her organizational skills and her 1916 involvement with Clan of Gael for many years and helping out with all different Irish Republican organizations and her fight for freedom for Ireland.
There would always be the parade in Philadelphia, which was a highlight for us as a family, because we would all go down and my father would march in the parade with an organization, the Holy Name Society, as each parish would send a bus down with members from the parish, and we would stand on the sidelines and cheer.
To continue the tradition of the St. Patrick's Day Parade in the city of Philadelphia is a time-honored tradition that should never ever stop.
The Philadelphia St. Patrick's Day is important because it allows us a sense of identity here, and it was when we first came over from Ireland to America, we need to assimilate, and we need also to know where we belong, and we brought some of those things from Ireland to Philadelphia, and we were able to, due to Americans' civil liberties and their rights, allowed us to share those and continue them here in America.
We, as members of the AOH, think it's important to maintain Irish heritage and Irish culture. So the one way we show it is we participate in St. Patrick's Day Parade. It's a very family-oriented day. We go out, we celebrate all day. Today's kids, youth, whatever, they need to celebrate where they came from. Everybody came from somewhere. So, you know, if you came from Ireland, if your ancestors came from Ireland, you should be able to celebrate it. And what better way to do it than St. Patrick's Day Parade?
Well, it's been happening for over 200 years, and it now means so much to me to bring my family here and to expose them to the Irish culture and the history of what's going on, especially this year, of the 100th anniversary of the 1916 Rising. It's great that I can explain it to my kids and help celebrate and commemorate that time for us.
The parade is just a major portion of what we do every year. It's the reason that we all get together. It's the reason that we all want to be together, because we all get down there, we have a great time, and enjoy each other's company, and we look forward to it every year.
The St. Patrick's Day Parade is very important, that tradition be passed on to the young people, and they participate. Later on, they read more about the immigrants. Their parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents were immigrants that suffered a lot before they came. And they carry on that tradition of the parade.
The St. Patrick's Day Parade in Philadelphia is so important to the Irish because our ancestors came here to Philadelphia. They were leaving times that were hard in Ireland, and they came here and they used the parade and celebration of their history, ancestry to really make their mark. And it's important for our generation to continue that and to continue what they started all those years ago, 246 years ago actually.
The problem has been, not the problem, but my concern over the parade has been trying to balance the fun, the green beer and the funny Irish hats and the silly sunglasses and stuff like that, with the cultural parts of the parade, which are very important. I mean, the maintenance of Irish dance and song, the recognition of both history in Ireland and history of Irish people in America, those need to be all represented and are represented in the parade. And I think that's what is why it's so culturally significant. Certainly there's a lot of fun, certainly there's beer and drinking, certainly there's, a good time, but I think it's significant that we recognize and remember where we came from, how we got here, and what we've done since we've been here, and also how that relates to other elements of immigration that we're dealing with today.
To think that you've been marching continuously for close to over 200 years of showing your Irish heritage. Again, we all bring immigration into the piece of what we go through Americans every day. And the immigration story is a proud part of where you come from.
We need to continue marching in this parade because we're third, fourth, fifth generation Irish. We came here with a certain culture in our bones, I'd like to say, and it continues that and keeps us together at least for one day of the year, marching in memory of the great sacrifice that our ancestors did for us to make this wonderful life in Philadelphia. So we continue our parade for that reason.
We in the GAA feel that it's very important to be involved with St. Patrick's Day Parade because it gets our name out there, it gets our image out there, and it's sports in America, especially in Philadelphia, is one of the main things that connects with people. And we've connected with a lot of young American kids for the last 15, 20 years now.
The parade is a tradition, and with any tradition, if you don't practice the tradition, then usually what happens is that over time, the tradition goes away. The tradition becomes a memory, and then after a few generations, maybe, the memory is lost and memory fades. And that's sad because now you don't have the tradition. Well, if the St. Patrick's Day Parade was to go away, really sad because I think that what happens on that day is just so important to the Irish community as far as, being able to get together and to keep our traditions alive. Traditions such as the dancing, for instance. Everybody loves the Irish dancing.
I started really into the Irish when it was around 71. A place called Emmett's was teaching Irish dancing. When I was growing up, I didn't have any connection with step dancing or anything like that because we just never did. My parents were busy raising family and never got any of us into it. In 71, they saw that they were having Irish dancing, and I said I was like a junior in high school, I said I'd take lessons, but if I don't like it, I'm not doing it again. And then I started teaching dancing in 72 and formed the dance group. And we were in the first parade in 76. And I've been in it ever since.
I personally feel it's important. Other than the fact that I grew up with this, since I've been a little kid. My uncle was the founder of this parade.
Joseph Patrick Brown. Pat Brown was an iconic figure in the Irish community. He was he's the first signer of the charter of the St. Patrick's Day Observance Association.
St. Patrick's Day Parade is so important to the Irish because it shows a tradition of Irish involvement and how all the way back to when they came here. And there's a lineage to the Irish in Philadelphia and the tradition, and it connects us to Irish all over the world. It is important that we protect culture because it gives us a sense of who we are, where we've come from, and where we can go.
I was born to it. I always came to the parade when I was little, all through high school, college. When I was away, I didn't, but when I came back, I organized the Brahons into coming into this parade right after they were formed. It's just part of who I am. It's a life's pleasure. We're the umbrella group for every Irish group that there is. Parade, because everybody wants to be in the parade.
It's so important to continue and observe tradition and the St. Patrick's Day Parade as our tradition because it brings people together. It's something that we can look back on. It's something that we can look forward to. Being able to come together for this cause each year, you know, we're not promised all the people who are in our lives next year. We're not promised tomorrow. And being able to have a reason to spend time together, to experience something together, to believe in, it's the most important thing that you can do with people that you care about. So to have this tradition, to be able to share generation to generation, I can share it with my grandfather and my grandkids. It's the one thing that we'll always have in common because we all have different lives and experiences, but being able to share this, it helps us feel like we're a part of something because we are a part of something and it matters to us. So to be able to share this with everyone who matters to you and to come together, it's the most important thing you can do.
The group I marched with today was the Ancient Order of Hibernians, Division AOH 39, which is, at this point, is the largest division in Philadelphia. History it goes way back to helping protect the Catholic Church. And there's a lot of different divisions in the AOH that are here today. So that's who I marched with, Division 39. They're from my old neighborhood, basically.
I started covering the parade for the Irish Edition newspaper in '97. Before that, I was in AOH Division 87 and took pictures for the parade.
And every year there are just so many groups that take part in the parade that make the parade as great as it always is. Of course, you have the mayor and all the politicians. Every politician is Irish for the day of the parade. You have the policemen, the firemen.
We felt that Daniel Faulkner should be honored in the parade this past year because of his affiliation with our organization. His brothers were members of the organization. We have a lot of brothers who are in our organization and within the AOH worldwide that are officers of the law and many first responders. So we felt it necessary to honor him in this parade. We paid tribute by carrying the flag. I was honored myself personally, very heartfelt. But I was honored personally to be carrying his flag during the parade. We got to 13th and Market. We dipped the flag. One of our brothers played Danny Boy, and it was solid. It was excellent. We felt great about doing it. The rest of the parade didn't know that we were going to do it. And when we did it, the look on the officers' faces that were on that corner was unreal.
God bless them for what they do. You also have the Archdiocese and all the different schools. grade schools and high schools get involved. Some of the marching bands are involved as well. Other bands, as far as some of the Irish bands, from the Blackthorns, the Galway Guild, there's more bands than I can remember to mention, but they're all interspersed throughout the parade, and it gives a great entertainment value to the parade. The pipes and drum bands, tremendous. You know, there's nothing like hearing the peal of bagpipes, you know, as you're walking in the distance.
The LEOH has been around for a long time. It started actually in 1894. It was called the Daughters of Erin, and of all places it started in Omaha, Nebraska, and it was a group of women that were reaching out to Irish immigrant women to try and give them a safe haven, somewhere to come that they could meet other Irish women and that had shared the same faith perhaps, or that just had the same wants and needs in life, which was, to find employment in a new country, but to feel safe where they were. Fast forward 1906, New York, they become the Ladies Auxiliary of the Hibernians. And then they became involved with the Ancient Order of Hibernians, doing the charitable works and things of that nature. And then 1982, we became the Ladies Ancient Order of Hibernians. We dropped the auxiliary and just went with that. Not saying that we broke away from the men, or that we had ill feelings towards the men. It just became that we're just two different organizations. Both do friendship, unity, and Christian charity, our motto. Just maybe in a different way.
In the 1950s, as the Archdiocese of Philadelphia became more involved in the parade, there's a greater participation that would emerge within the larger Archdiocese population outside of the city of Philadelphia. Suburbanization happened after World War II. New parishes emerged, and old parishes with predominantly Irish backgrounds were involved in the parade. More floats and more marching units from suburban areas would be involved, as well as the Archdiocesan School District. Schools from throughout the surrounding Delaware Valley would be involved in this parade, really for the first time.
But the Friendly Sons of St. Patrick, as they started to try to, kind of emphasize a pan-Irish outlook on things, and to bring together, different religious traditions and so forth, both from the Catholic and the Protestant side. There's a larger influx of Catholic Irish that come in the earlier decades of the 19th century. And certainly the church gets involved in this. The Catholic Church in Philadelphia is very much interested in promoting Irish identity from a Catholic perspective. That plays out in how the churches supported the parade, and certainly different congregations did.
After World War II, the Ancient Order of Hibernians became much more heavily involved, and the Archdiocese of Philadelphia became much more heavily involved. Of course, St. Patrick happens to be the patron saint of Ireland, makes sense, in the big picture. But the Catholic nature of the parade became much more pronounced after World War II.
The AOH has a large responsibility within the community to our fellow Irish Americans. We feel that things such as the Philadelphia Parade and other events that we participate in all year long help keep the Irish community together as one. It starts at home, like everything else in this world. We're no different than any other ethnic organization within the Philadelphia city limits of the United States of America. We feel that we need to stick together and to help one another and to support one another, and also outreach to other folks that may not be Irish, may not be Catholic. An example of that was today. We went out and we donated our time and our efforts, and we gave away 40 to 50 Christmas dinners to the needy families here in Delaware County. So that's something that the AOH does all the time.
The Archdiocese of Philadelphia is very involved with our Philadelphia St. Patrick's Day Parade. At the first parade, when they consolidated all the parades in 1951, the Archbishop came out on the cathedral steps and blessed the beginning of the parade and gave a benediction. Since that relationship forged in 1951, the Archbishop has said the Mass, the parade Mass, just about every year. Only time they'd be missing is if they were in Rome or something like that. So it had to be something serious why they wouldn't be there. We are blessed to have a great relationship with the Archbishop of Philadelphia, the auxiliary bishops, as well as many of our priests and sisters, religious sisters. In fact, some of our religious sisters have been named Grand Marshal, as well as some of the priests. So to make sure that we reaffirm not only our Irish heritage, but our Catholic faith is important to continue that relationship with the Archdiocese.
In the early 1950s, when the Philadelphia St. Patrick's Day Parade Committee really organized themselves and started inviting in outside groups and community support, they enlisted support from the fire and the police forces and the various bands that marched from these organizations, really allowed the Philadelphia community, the Irish in Philadelphia, to take a greater ownership of the parade. And it also expanded out, certainly, again, the numbers and the finances, enabling the parade to grow in a way that would have been unimaginable 100 years before that.
The Ring of Honor is chosen now by the president of the parade. Years ago, it was chosen by the board. And the reason for the Ring of Honor is that we live in a metropolitan area of about 5 million people. To select one person as the Grand Marshal is a difficult enough task. However, by allowing people to be put in the Ring of Honor, it acknowledges their achievements and their lifelong commitment to being Irish Catholic. So the Ring of Honor was formed in about 1980, and it usually honors men and women who are outstanding in our community, as well as sometimes it's just an organization. As the year of the Irish Memorial, their 10th anniversary, their entire board was put in. So it could be a group, it could be an individual. It's usually a diverse group of people, both men and women, and it's just a great honor, and it actually helps to be spreading some of our honors around.
Parade committee has to be given a lot of credit for going out on a limb and putting somebody like me as head of the Grand Marshal, which was a slap in the face to the British government and to all those who opposed Irish republicanism from 1916.
One of the proudest accomplishments and boards that I participate on as an elected official is being a member of the St. Patrick's Day Parade Observance Day Committee. I think it's really special because the special people who are committed to their Irish heritage, their principles and culture, and we get to work 12 months a year to showcase to the rest of Philadelphia and the Philadelphia region who we are and how proud we are and what our history depicts us to be as people today.
At the parade today, I am a St. Patrick's Day Observances board member. I'm also a member of the Donegal Association. I was on their float. And I am also involved in the Philadelphia Rose of Tralee. And I'm a proud Philadelphia Irish American.
Little by little, we start to be accepted by different boards. This is how I came to be on the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Philadelphia. I was very active in many different Irish organizations and president of many. And one day, one of the board members of the parade asked me to give him my resume. And next thing I knew, I was on the board of the Philadelphia St. Patrick's Day Parade. And I have to tell you, it was one of my proudest accomplishments. Since then, I've done many different jobs, do a lot of social media. I wrote all the articles for the Irish edition. I was there for everything. I never missed an event, and I participated in everything. And then slowly but surely, I was able to convince the men to bring on other women who had different talents than I had, which is what happened. So now we're up to 5 women on our board, and all great women who contribute to our community.
Board of Directors and the committee is made up of like 26 Board of Directors. And we have an executive committee. It consists of the president, secretary, and 2 vice chairs. And we actually implement the direction of the parade along with our parade director, Mike Bradley, who's a very effective part of the parade. For the last 16 years, Mike has directed the parade, and
and his direction in the parade as far as the logistics and every moving part is on him, and he does a tremendous job at that, and I have to send out kudos to Mike Bradley.
The responsibilities of the parade director are multifaceted. Although it's a tremendous amount of responsibility and work, it's also a tremendous honor to represent the Philadelphia Irish community and the surrounding counties. The fact is, the parade director is the one who organizes the parade. He divides up the dance groups from the floats, from the marching units, and makes sure the flow of the parade is well coordinated with television, with the disc jockey for the music for the dancers, and for the crowd watching at home as well as the crowd on the street. It involves a lot of work and coordination with the Philadelphia Police Department. Homeland Security now, unfortunately, is also involved, and as well as the city of Philadelphia and all their officials. To coordinate that along with the National Park Service, because we're in front of Independence Mall, which is where the Declaration of Independence was signed, adds more security concerns. So in essence, the parade responsibility on the parade director is very, very tenuous, and it is a very difficult job, but I'm helped greatly by the Marshals. We have over 90 Marshals who volunteer their time, and they do such a great job. They really are the guts of the parade. And also I have an assistant parade director now, who's my son Colin. We have the 26 board members. Each one of them pitch in with some kind of responsibility that day. So in essence, the whole coordination comes together and looks like a seamless transaction as the parade passes through the reviewing stand in front of our Grand Marshal and in front of our President and the rest of our board. Since the parades were all coordinated and consolidated in 1951 to be one official Philadelphia St. Patrick's Day parade, there's only been 4 parade directors, so obviously it's a great honor for me. People ask, how is the Philadelphia St. Patrick's Day Parade Grand Marshal selected? We get nominations from the general public of outstanding men and women in our community who have done outstanding things. We also get nominations from our own board, the 26 members of our board. And we debate and we look at their resume and their body of work. And we put all the names into the nomination and usually come up with 2 and then have a vote, and the majority rules at that point.
The board will sit down and go over, here's different nominations for the board. We try to mix it at times with clergy, whether it's priest. I mean, we had Archbishop Bevilacqua, before he was a cardinal, Grand Marshal, okay? Because of what, at the time, you know, with the archdiocese and all, and the guy had personality, to say the least. Then, you know, we had past nuns who were involved. Sister James Ann, then there was one priest, Father Riley, and things like that. So we try to mix that up. Most of the board members should be Grand Marshal for what they do and how they bring things to life and get involved with the community and getting people coordinated and all that. But we try to be prudent about that and spreading it out to different groups and different organizations. The Grand Marshal for the St. Patrick's Day Parade, it's always an interesting subject. I always wrote a list down. I remember when I was president, I sat down with Jim Kilgallen and Paul Phillips, who were 2 great leaders and past presidents and past Grand Marshals in the St. Patrick's Day Parade. And I sat down with them and said, who do you think would be on a list of your next 5 to 10 Grand Marshals? There's so many people in the Philadelphia area that people can be selected. Obviously, the theme has something to do with it. You know, this year, you know, we had it for the police officers, but we want to get it and spread it around to different organizations, different communities. And the past year was Barney Boyce and his family. Barney's the father of the people from Blackthorn, his wife Carmel, terrific people from Donegal, who have contributed for years, since the 50s, contributing and impacting Irish culture and Irish heritage.
One thing that we do, I've always seen Barney and Carmel together, so we're not going to honor just Barney Boyce. We're going to honor Barney and Carmel Boyce together. So ladies and gentlemen, I give you the 2017 Grand Marshal of the Philadelphia St. Patrick's Day, Mr. and Mrs. Barney and Carmel Boyce.
Well, first of all, I want to thank President Clark and Councilman Heenan for sponsoring this resolution today. I am highly honoured, very grateful as an immigrant from County Donegal. Came here 60 years ago and I didn't join, I was drafted in the army by Uncle Sam. I didn't know I had an uncle here called Sam, but I found out later I did.
Yeah, well, to be selected for Grand Marshal of the parade was a great surprise to me to begin with. When I got notified that I was selected, it was totally a surprise to me. I really enjoyed it, every bit of it, because it was something. Down through the years, I've marched in almost all the parades from I came to the country 60 years ago, and never ever dreamed that I would ever be selected as Grand Marshal. Never crossed my mind, but it was a great honor. I appreciated it, and I'll always cherish it as well. And my kids, my children, my wife enjoyed it as well.
It was a great honor when we found out that Barney was elected to be Grand Marshal. It was something we never anticipated happening. We were elated that he was chosen to be Grand Marshal, and from day one we all got behind him and did everything that we were supposed to do and went to all the events, and our grandchildren were just so happy and so proud of him that it meant the world to all of us as a family.
Well, I was shocked to be asked to be the Grand Marshal. As a child, I was in the parades and watched the parades. Never thought I'd be leading the parade. It was a great honor to be a sister of St. Joseph and to be asked to lead the parade. I did it in honor of my parents.
In 2016, it was a great honor for me to be made Grand Marshal of the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Philadelphia. It was the 100th anniversary of the 1916 Rising, and what it did, it brought together 100 years of Republican activity here in Philadelphia to highlight. And I accepted that not on my own behalf, but on behalf of everybody who worked for United Ireland for years and years here in the Philadelphia area.
Took part in every facet of it that was involved, going to benefits and going to meetings and discussing all the different things about it. It was something to go down in my memories and remain there. And probably it's a one-time thing, so you have to make your best of it.
The Grand Marshal of the St. Patrick's Day Parade is a leader in improving the face of the Irish in the area which they live. I was elected because I brought children from Northern Ireland, from Belfast and Derry and Tyrone, because they were suffering during the times of the Troubles in Northern Ireland. The recent Troubles. There have been Troubles over 800 years, and the younger generation doesn't know about it. They have to read and learn.
You know, I was nominated 3 different years for Grand Marshal. Think about that, Grand Marshal of the Philadelphia St. Patrick's Day Parade. And finally, on the 3rd time, I got selected. And it was one of the most amazing achievements of my lifetime. There have been, including this year, 5 women Grand Marshal of the parade. Sister Frances Kirk was the first in 1991. And she was very active in helping the children involved with the Troubles in Ireland. And then there was Rosemary Timmon, who is the queen of Irish dance. And then the third person was Sister James Ann, who is our parade chaplain, and very much an Irish dance teacher herself.
When I was chosen to be the Grand Marshal, it was a very great honor. That year, the theme for the parade was voted upon, and it would be to recognize women religious and their service to the church and to the community. Being active in the Irish community so much over all the years, I think was part of the criteria that enabled them to nominate me and then to vote for me as Grand Marshal. When I accepted that honor, I accepted it in the name of all the women religious in the diocese in the country. And I said this is an honor for them that I would be able to represent the sisters who have worked so hard to bring the good news of God to so many people.
And then I was fourth. To be the fourth woman in the entire history of the parade is an amazing achievement, and I can't even tell you how amazing it was. So the night of the sashing of the Grand Marshal, all these different organizations came up and gave me awards and honored me. My whole family was there, and it was like queen for a day.
To say it was an honor is an understatement. And every time that I spoke that year at anything, I always remembered the people who went before me and who done so much work behind the scenes to try and achieve a united Ireland.
So my dad was Grand Marshal and honored to be so, but he was asked 3 different times. And one of them he gave up for a cardinal and someone else that he thought would make a great Grand Marshal. And as him being a board member, he just, wasn't worried about getting all the fame. So they finally, because he was sick a couple of those years, he decided, okay, now's the time. So it was hard for him. They get to pick as Grand Marshal 3 of the groups that they want to come and be in the front of the parade. So it was hard for him to narrow it down, but his first pick, of course, was the Southwest St. Patrick's Club, who he started with his best friend, Hoot Delaney. Still continues to this day. And they were one of the only Irish organizations in the city of Philadelphia to have a parade in their neighborhood before they went downtown and did the parade. So, and the Southwest St. Patrick's Club still to this day marches in the parade proudly. He also chose the Cara School, which is now McDade Cara, because my son Brendan Ryan Irish step danced and was in Worlds for 3 different times. So the continuation of the Irish heritage continues on. But my family, one of 8, we were all very proud of my father when he was Grand Marshal. And most people know him as Newt Bonner. And it was a great year, great sunshine that day. It's shown on the Parkway, and we were all very proud of him.
To me personally, this has been a great honor to be chosen to be the Grand Marshal. I don't look at it as an honor for myself. I look that I am representing I consider my greatest generation of Irish that had to leave in the 50s and 60s and come here, and on the back, these people, I represent that generation of people, I believe, rather than myself. I think it's important that we get a recognition of I would consider us that we are the last group of really Irish immigrants because of the 1966 immigration laws were changed. So to me, that is the biggest honor that I can say, is that I represent a group of Irish that came here in the 50s and 60s, not taken away from the smaller groups that came later. Again, that's my real honor, would be to represent these people.
This is one of the only parades in the country that starts off with the Mass, and it's the centerpiece of our event.
The reason why I love the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Philadelphia, it's because it always starts at St. Patrick's Church. Right there, you go to Deli, you go to the Mass beforehand, and you leave. And I remember my first one when I was a U.S. Congressman, and And in the front rows was Sister Jane McFadden, who taught me in first grade at St. Anselm's. And her dad was Bishop McFadden, her brother was Bishop McFadden. So, you know, it's a culture and folks that you grew up with and folks that you work with to do what's right for the city and the region and our country are folks that are really proud to be Irish and be proud to represent, especially on that day.
The logistics of the parade is actually a daunting task, and it helps if you have ADD because you're juggling a lot of balls in the air at the same time. However, it is a live event. One thing I do is I prepare for everything I can prepare for. However, I have no idea what the groups are preparing. They practice their routine. They know what to expect. They know exactly what they're doing at what time, when they're making their spin moves and their dances, and I have no idea and must react to all these if they're running too long, too short. So being a parade director is a little bit difficult task, but you have to be prepared. However, when changes happen, you definitely need to be proactive and make split decision choices. It's like squeezing a balloon. You squeeze it over here and it comes out over here. You squeeze it over here, it comes out on this side. So I can give you an example. Last year, we had the President of Ireland, or the Taoiseach, Mr. Enda Kenny came. We also had some security issues because some things happened in the United States that were obviously unsettling, where we had some terrorist attacks. So we had Homeland Security and the Secret Service call me the Friday before the parade and asked me to have every vehicle had to be swept search for bombs. So we had to send them all down to 30th Street Station, an iconic part of Philadelphia with their great granite marble columns, and have every vehicle go through there with less than 48 hours notice. We contacted all the marshals, and we were able to pull that off seamlessly. So when it came across on television, it looked great. But I can tell you, it was like a duck on a pond. It looked all calm, but there was an awful lot of pedaling underneath. So that's one of the things that happens to a parade director, and you just have to be able to adjust. The Irish community comes alive to save their parade every year, and it certainly takes a village to be able to do that. We have fundraisers throughout the year. We have a golf outing. We have an event in Springfield, Delaware County. We also have another event in Northeast Philadelphia. We have little fundraisers throughout the year where we have a trip to Ireland tickets. We sell sponsorship. We have a parade book. And everyone comes together to make sure that we keep this tradition alive. It's very important to keep our traditions alive. There's a lot of people that would like to see traditions end. However, we need to continue this because as we do not have as many immigrants come over from Ireland these days, it's important that their children and their grandchildren understand the vitalness of this parade, our heritage, and our Catholic faith. Up in the front are the politicians and the heavy hitters and the big people who donate money. But the group that's last is also just as important as the first group, because without them, there is no parade, and every group is important to us. However, there's one important thing that's really important. There is no parade director, there is no board of directors, there are no presidents without the people that march. The people that march are the parade. They're the ones that are important, because without them, I don't have a job to do. Our board doesn't have a job to do. So I'm thanking all our marchers and all their supporters for what they do, because without them, there is no parade.
We chronicled the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Philadelphia from our very first issue in 1981. So we started with the March issue, and then we covered the follow-up and highlighting all the various Irish organizations and reflections of Irish culture in the area.
And I must say, for many years, the support we got from the crowd along the parade route was outstanding, which helped change the mind of the St. Patrick's Day Committee.
So again, why we celebrate this great day once a year is it's a celebration of St. Patrick, the patron saint of Ireland. And I continually remind it and remind others, without being pompous in any way, but to remind folks that it is not St. Pat's Day, and it's not St. Paddy's Day. it is St. Patrick's Day, the patron saint of Ireland, who deserves all the respect of Ireland and America. And I ask only that we continue to refer to this parade as the St. Patrick's Day Parade.
The Philadelphia St. Patrick's Day Parade has reflected the interests and the concerns of the Irish community in Philadelphia from its inception in 1771. So through the years that preceded in the parade's history, all the important flashpoints in American history and in Irish history get reflected within it, including the success of the American Revolution through the War of 1812. You got to consider that in early years, the Irish were very much interested in fighting against the oppressor in Britain. So the success of the American Revolution and in holding on to the country in 1812 meant a lot to them. The terrible years of the famine and the poorer Irish who came into the country. You know, the importance, of course, of the years subsequent to that, when political consciousness emerges in groups like the United Irishmen, Clan na Gael, for example. These things are reflected more and more in the parade as there's a kind of desperation that emerges within the Irish population at home for independence from Britain. And then you get to the fruitful events of the first part of the 20th century, the 1916 uprising and the Irish successful War of Independence in the early 1920s. Through the World War II years, and the Great Depression, and the parade sort of goes on a wane. And after that time period, the enormous flourishing of the parade during the time when the Archdiocese and the Ancient Order of Hibernians get involved in running the parade. The parade has grown in size and in scope. Many more organizations have come to be represented within it. Lots of new musical groups, lots of more the dance traditional organizations. And the parade has grown in size and intensity as the years have gone by. Everyone who's involved in it recognizes that March is the most important month in the Irish calendar, and the day of St. Patrick's Day, the 17th. Never, you know, does the parade actually fall on that day. Almost it's all inevitable that the week before, when the parade happens, that's St. Patrick's Day to many people.
But when he comes and all the flowers are dying, if I am dead, as dead I well may be, you'll come and find the place where I am lying, and kneel and say,